Welcome to the Liturgy of the Chalice. Thank you so much for coming today and worshiping with me and listening to this sacred message that we receive from the Gospel of Mark today. And thank you to everybody who listens online after the fact. The more you can share these messages, the more you click on like, the more you follow the YouTube page, the more you share, the more this message can get out and make a positive impact in the world. So please share it and also interact for those that are part of our online church, because you are a valuable part of this church, and all of you make up the vast majority of this church, other than those that gather with me physically. So thank you to everybody, near and far, for supporting the Church of St. Philip. Let's begin. This is a continuation of our discussion about verses from the Gospel of Mark. We don't do every verse, we select verses and try and take out the cream of the crop, particularly verses of when Jesus is speaking and teaching us. So this is part 8 of a series. So now we get to a part in chapter 4 of Mark in which Jesus alludes to the fact that there are secret teachings of Jesus, that there are different understandings or different ways of understanding what he says. Let's listen to the Master Jesus' words. In Mark 4:10 through 14, we read, "When he was alone, those who were around him, along with the 12, asked him about the parables. And he said to them, 'To you has been given the secret of the kingdom of God. But for those outside, everything comes in parables, in order that they may indeed look, but not perceive, and may indeed listen, but not understand, so that they may not turn again and be forgiven.' And he said to them, 'Do you not understand this parable? Then how will you understand all the parables?'" So if you weren't here last week, we went over the first of Jesus' parables in the Gospel of Mark, which was the parable of the sower. He sows seed on rock and it fails, and he puts it in good soil and it grows, etc. And we talked about the fact that the seeds represent the teachings of Jesus. And it represents the Malkuth of God, the sovereignty of the rulership of God. Because all of Jesus' teachings, he developed them so that his listeners can become aligned with the sovereignty of God. So the word of Jesus, the teachings of Jesus, they were meant to bring us into alignment with the sovereignty of God, the sovereignty of heaven. And the Aramaic word for that is the Malkuth. So apparently, based off of these verses, especially Mark 4:14, do you not understand this parable? He's asking them if they don't understand the parable of the sower that we discussed last week and reviewed briefly right now. If you don't understand that teaching, how will you understand all of the parables? So it's apparent that even Jesus' closest disciples, his inner circle, did not at this early stage understand the full import of his teachings. And that's normal for every beginner on the spiritual path. When you're beginning, sometimes we hear the spiritual teacher speaking and we kind of interpret it to suit our needs. This happens a lot in modern Orthodox Christianity, where gospel is interpreted to suit certain needs, beliefs, prejudices, etc. But Jesus taught us so we can go beyond our needs, our attachments, beyond our desires, beyond our prejudices. So when he was alone, Jesus would be asked from his closest disciples, including the 12, the apostles, about the parables. So Jesus would magnetize huge crowds of people. They were very interested. They knew he was a prophet of God. They heard that he was a great healer and a great exorcist. So they all wanted to come and see what was up, right? But he would teach to the public in the form of parables, but he would also meet those that were dedicated to his teachings, that wanted to learn on a more deeper, profound level. He would gather with them in smaller situations, when he was alone, not in crowds of thousands, but when he was perhaps with his closest, most earnest disciples. And he said to them, "To you has been given the secret of the Malkuth, the rulership of God. But for those outside, everything comes in parables." So the Aramaic word for parable is mashalim. And mashalim, or parables, are stories that Jesus told to illuminate how God interacts with humanity, how God uplifts humanity. And he taught in ways that people could understand. But there's a lot of deep, pregnant meaning in every word that Jesus spoke. And you had to grok the parable. You were meant to hear the parable, think about the parable, and ultimately embody it in your thoughts, words, and actions. So it wasn't meant to be something that you heard and just say, "Oh, that sounds cool," and then forget about it. You're supposed to hear the parables and reflect about your relationship with God. So in the last parable from last week, the parable of the sower, when you hear that, some of these seeds were spread everywhere, and some fell on rock and couldn't grow, the hardness of the human heart, not willing to follow spiritual teachings and make changes that are positive for themselves as individuals, all of humanity and all of nature, that's what the rocks represent. The teachings that help us to come into alignment and to inherit co-sovereignty with God, it fell on a hard heart, on closed ears. That's what it means when the seed fell on the rocks. But some of the seeds fell on good soil and produced a good yield. And we should think to ourselves, I don't want to be the poetic seed that falls on the rocks. I want to make my heart open to God, open to Mar Yeshua's teachings, so that when I hear the seeds, the teachings of Jesus, that it gets planted deep in my heart and it grows, and that the harvest from those seeds are my good thoughts, my good words, my good actions that spread pure love, compassion, justice for everyone that I touch, for everyone that I see. So Mar Yeshua would just speak these parables to the crowd. And those that were just window shoppers would go away. And those that were deeply interested would try to connect with him, or maybe one of the 12, or one of the other disciples that were close to Jesus, and they'd say, "Well, what did he mean?" And if Jesus or the apostles felt that they were sincere, they would invite them to come closer. And ultimately, Jesus would keep weeding down the disciples until he came to those that were serious enough to want to practice. My martial arts teacher says, quoting Miyamoto Musashi, a famous samurai, one of his best teachings was to the point. The way is in training. The way is in training. And likewise, the first description of Christianity wasn't the word Christianity. The words used in the Didache was the way of life, the way towards spiritual growth, or there was the way to death, the way to spiritual death. So there's a way for everything. There's a spiritual way for religion. There's a way for martial arts. There's a way of cooking properly. Otherwise, you make burnt crap, right? So the way is in the training. And the way that people got into Jesus' inner circles, whom he gave deeper interpretation to the meaning of the parables, and to whom he also gave different spiritual techniques like that enabled them to have divine ascents, like the transfiguration event, they were all given in private. And they were given to those that stuck to it, those that came regularly, those that dedicated themselves to his teachings. He would give them more deeper understandings. He would elaborate. He would teach subtle spiritual practices to allow them to purify their hearts. And once the full purification and sanctification of one's heart, the seat of their mind, was purified, they would be eligible for the highest form of initiation that Jesus offered, which was spiritual rebirth or spiritual regeneration, which made them eligible to become anointed by the divine, by God, to become a Bar Enash, part of the Son of Mankind collective Messiah. So that's what Jesus meant when he said, "To you I've given the secret of the Malkuth," the sovereignty of God, the rulership of God. And by giving the deeper meaning of the spiritual practices associated with it, it purified them and made them experience the messianic marriage banquet, where they became reborn. And then from that stage, they were able to unify their soul with Godhead. So the secret of the Malkuth is truly understanding on a deep level each parable and embodying it in our every thought, word, and deed. And Jesus only gave the deepest understanding and the deepest practices to those that trained. Because if you're not training, if you're not doing what Jesus asks us to do, then you're not following the way. If you're not fulfilling all the teachings of Jesus in earnest, then you're not a Christian. You're not following the way of life. If you don't follow his teachings, you're following the way of death, the way of spiritual death, spiritual ignorance, spiritual apathy. So we need to consciously redirect every thought, word, and deed and make them all in alignment with Mar Yeshua's teachings, the Master Jesus' teachings. Let's look at the second half of this teaching. So he says that he purposely clothes or hides his deepest teaching within these parables, that they may indeed look but not perceive, and may indeed listen but not understand, so that they may not turn again and be forgiven. I think there's some historicity to this, and I also think that there's some dogmatic addition over the course of time. There is no spiritual master that doesn't want to forgive those that have hurt them in some way. So to say, so that they, whoever they is, may not turn again and be forgiven, I doubt Jesus would have said that. Purified, sanctified, saintly souls do not condemn people forever. They don't. They don't. So to say that Jesus said that he wasn't going to forgive somebody is some other hateful human's heart adding that to this scripture over the course of time. So, where did this part come from? Because notice this section is in quotes. He's quoting someone. What is Jesus quoting when he says, in order that they may indeed look but not perceive, and may indeed listen but not understand, so that they may not turn again and be forgiven. They, back in Jesus' time, were insincere hearers. When you read the Christian Testament, you see many times that different Pharisees and Sadducees were listening in on Jesus' teachings, and they were trying to find ways to trap him so that they could call him out, discredit him, ultimately murder him. So they were insincere hearers of Jesus' times. Those that were listening that really didn't want to learn, but they were just, there to cause trouble. And also there was a factor of people, other than those people that were dangerously insincere towards Jesus. And we have these all the time. People that hop from guru to guru, from church to church, from this spiritual experience to that New Age experience. People that are insincere because they cannot settle down on something and do it until they reach the full maturation of that spiritual process. So Jesus also hid his deepest teachings in parables to protect those sacred inner teachings from people that were just spiritual butterflies, hopping from this flower to the next. And still to this day, this church knows of many deep spiritual teachings that I'll never teach here. People that come regularly to this group, online or in person, they are invited to come to a one-on-one meeting on Zoom where we all discuss deeper teachings and deeper spiritual practices. But it's to an inner circle. It's for those that come regularly, that want to make the Master Jesus' teachings the core of their life. The goal of their life is spiritual perfection. Any of you that want to do that, message me on Facebook, email me, call me, and we'll include you in the inner circle group of our church. And it's not to disclude people. Anybody that wants to be sincere and grow is welcome. So it's not so much as there are secret teachings of Jesus that are withheld from people. It's that those teachings are preserved for those that are dedicated, for those that are serious, that want to be a true disciple of Jesus. To any of you out there that are that caliber, message me on Facebook, message me on YouTube, message me, email me, and I will include you in that deeper group. It's a beautiful group of souls. Small group that really wants to do it. If you're that person, let's do it together. But again, where did this come from? This idea that teaching should be hidden from insincere people. This quoted area seems to come from Isaiah, the book of Isaiah, the Hebrew Testament. And the cited material that we think it comes from is Isaiah 6:9. And he said, he being God, Yahweh, and he said, "Go and say to this people, keep on hearing, but do not understand. Keep on seeing, but do not perceive." This is what Jesus seems to be citing and expanding upon. What does this mean? Isaiah 6:9-10 describes the people to whom Isaiah, a prophet of the Hebrew Testament, was called to preach. The Lord, Yahweh, said that the people would reject Isaiah's message and thereby harden their hearts, make the heart of this people fat, and become spiritually deaf, make their ears heavy, and blind, shut their eyes. So Isaiah was a great prophet, and he highly influenced Jesus' teachings. We see Jesus often giving teachings that are in alignment with the book of Isaiah, or he is said to have quoted Isaiah directly in some passages of the Christian Testament. Directly, indirectly, and Isaiah informs his teachings. Again, Isaiah the book of Isaiah was developed during the Babylonian exile, the Babylonian diaspora of the Jews. And the Babylonian messianic expectation is the Son of Man, the Bar Enash, which we've taught many times is a collective Messiah. So the Son of Mankind, collective Messiah, is the communion of saints of all rebirthed, spiritually regenerated souls. And they become eligible for spiritual rebirth by doing and embodying in thought, word, and deed the teachings of the Master Jesus. But some people in all these crowds rejected Jesus' message, just like they rejected Isaiah's message back in Isaiah's day. So Jesus was essentially quoting Isaiah, saying that, like the time of Isaiah, some people will come and reject my message. Some people will only be window shoppers. Some people will listen so that they can try to corner me. And for all those people, those that reject me, those that are window shoppers, or those that are trying to hurt or impair my positive message from helping humanity, I hide the deeper meaning that they do not deserve in the parable. And for those of spiritual intuition, they will understand what they're hearing, and they will seek to learn more by persistently coming back, by helping the mission, by spreading the positive word and bringing others to hear. As it was in Jesus' time, as it is today in this very church. For those that have ears to hear, let them hear. For those that have eyes to see, let them see. And this shows that Jesus, this next verse seems contradictory, because Jesus at first says that there's secret teachings. And then he says, don't put the light, the wisdom procured from the teachings under a basket and hide it. So he's telling his disciples who understand the parables not to hide the light of Mar Yeshua's teaching under a bushel, under a basket, under a bed. But put that light of Jesus' halakha, of his gospel, of his proclamation, on a lampstand where everybody can see it, where it can shine for all. But of course, you shouldn't hide this spiritual light from sincere spiritual seekers. But still, the last verse is true. You should start off more discriminately, more modestly with new groups of people. And as a spiritual teacher or spiritual teachers within our community see people coming back repetitively, you reveal more and more the divine light to them. You show more of the way of life to them. But only to those that are training will more be given. Mark 4:21-23 says, he said to them, is a lamp brought in to be put under the bushel basket or under the bed and not on the lampstand? For there is nothing hidden except to be disclosed, nor is anything secret except to come to light. Let anyone with ears to hear listen. So Jesus is saying that although he does hide his teachings in parables, for those that are sincere, those hidden teachings should be disclosed. Anything that is considered secret should come to light, should be seen and understood by sincere, dedicated spiritual seekers. So Mar Yeshua it wasn't like a secret society. That wasn't what it was like. He wasn't trying to hide the teachings for an elite few. He just wanted to see that we were sincere in our spiritual seeking. And anybody that was sincere, here his apostles would teach the deepest meanings and give the deeper spiritual practices. That is the true word of the Master Jesus, Mar Yeshua. Pay attention to what you hear, Jesus warns us. Mark 4:24 through 25, Jesus says, "Pay attention to what you hear. The measure you give will be the measure you get, and still more will be given to you. For to those who have, more will be given, and from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away." So Jesus is saying, pay attention to what you hear. A lot of different spiritual teachers are not authentic. There are many different true spiritual paths out there. But the core of all these religions and spiritual paths that are taught by authentic, sincere teachers, the core message is the same. Love people. Serve the vulnerable. Give God priority in your life and seek to understand that truth that you're striving for. But Jesus is saying, in particular to his teaching, in those times and the times of today, pay attention to what others are teaching. The measure you give will be the measure you get. So Jesus is saying that not all interpretations of Torah, of what the Messiah would be like, even of his halakha in today's churches, pay attention to what you hear. Are they teaching what I taught or something different? Are they doing what I did or are they doing something different? Because if you're following the wrong way, something that's taught incorrectly in a church or a synagogue or anywhere else, the measure you give will be the measure you get. Meaning if you're teaching something that's not an authentic teaching of Jesus, how can you do the way of Jesus? But if you teach what Jesus taught, if you do or try to do what Jesus did, then more will be given to you. So if you come to the path and you're sincere, you hear the teachings of Jesus, you show up, you make an effort, you help the mission, so to speak, then more will be given to you. Deeper understandings will be given to you. More teachings will be given to you. For those that have the basic teachings and do the basic teachings with sincerity, more will be given. And from those who have nothing, they misinterpreted Jesus' words or cherry-picked teachings to fit their prejudices and their desires and their needs and their want to be seen and heard. For those that distort my teachings, even what they have, whatever meager spiritual understanding they have, will be taken away. So Jesus is urging us to pay attention to his authentic teaching and the authentic spiritual teachings that are universal from all spiritual paths. Do what is universally true. And most especially, do what I say if you consider me your teacher. This is Mar Yeshua speaking through me, not you. And not me. Our teacher is Jesus, not me. Jesus is saying, if you want to do what I'm asking you to do, listen and do it. What I teach, do that. What I do that. Imitate me, that is the way. But if you take it, and if you do that, then more will be given to you. More grace, more teachings. You will ultimately become reborn, spiritually regenerated into the Son of Mankind, collected Messiah. You will inherit the Malkuth of God, because that seed I planted in your heart will grow until you are sharing in the co-sovereignty of God itself. But for those who don't understand my teachings and teach it wrong, or for those who purposely distort it for their egotistic needs, and you spread that message, even what they have, the little understanding they have, will be taken away, and you'll have no spiritual growth. It'll be like starting from scratch. if you decide to return to the way of God and the way of Jesus. This is our teachings from the Gospel of Mark today. Let's continue with the liturgy of the chalice.